It's working. I think we're good. Cody,
We got it
we're
going.
good. We got it going. For all you shit talkers in the chat already, we haven't even launched the show yet.
I know.
People are talking about my camera.
Gang's all here.
Yeah, it's technical difficulties. Cody's hiding in the background. We apologize for our tardiness. The crew was waiting on me. I was flying back from St. Louis, hopped off a plane, dropped our family off in the driveway, did a 180, and came back to record live. So, but I'm excited about the show. I've been waiting for this one for a long time. I want to do one in person with you as well, Nick, at some point.
I know. We got to make that happen.
We do have to make that happen. But Nick True, man, has changed my life, many people's lives in not only Best Hour and Affiliate U, but just all over the world. Is that an accurate statement, Nick?
Yeah, that's accurate. We're not a lot of people in Asia, but I think that's the only continent that we haven't done some work on.
So Nick is he's our budgeting guru inside of Best Hour, and we're going to get into all of that kind of stuff. And but he's helped us in Best Hour. He's helped me at CrossFit Rife, and then all three, Jay, Marcus, and I personally. And we're going to dive into all things budgeting. But that is Nick's forte, is budgeting. If you want to check him out on YouTube, do you still do much on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks.
Sorry. Not really.
Yes, no. So the answer is the last year or so in our personal life's been kind of crazy. We moved and we bought a new place and renovations, blah, 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 blah. So if you go look at my YouTube channel, it's going to look like I haven't been active in a while because I haven't. But now that we're settled, we're actually going to get back up and running very soon. So I'm hoping to start getting back to weekly sometime next month. So we're going to be back at it.
Very cool. So Marcus, I believe, so Marcus found you first through YNAB, which is You Need a Budget, or I believe it's through their kind of like YouTube channel. And then you're kind of a budgeting specialist, but particularly within the YNAB software. Is that a fair?
Yeah. So I would say like I got known, if you will, for this one particular tool. There's this one software tool called YNAB. It's a very popular budgeting tool. We can get into maybe why it's popular, because they do a couple things that are sort of fundamentally different. And it's not super intuitive because they do some stuff that's a little bit different, but that works. And so I started doing YouTube videos about that and built a little bit of a following. And so I've sort of taken my, philosophy, if you will, and just applied it to that tool. And that's what most people know me for.
So we'll get into all the details later, but like how does one get into being a budget specialist?
Good question. Well, the way that I did it was maybe not the most direct path, right? So I would say the foundation for me was that I was really into personal finance and money when I was young. I was reading personal finance books in high school, and I asked my dad, like my dad was a business owner and ran QuickBooks for his business and stuff. And I asked him to help me like set up a budget before I went off to college. And he set me up on Quicken, which was owned by QuickBooks at the time. It's like the personal version of it. Anyways, I don't know, man. Like I got into it really young as I was interested in it, in the same way that somebody might get into lifting when they're young because they just got into it. And so I don't have a good answer for that. But in terms of where I went from there, I went to school, got a degree in something I don't want to use, and got a job at a place I didn't want to work. And
sounds like all of the life advice that we've all been given growing up.
Yes, exactly.
Go to school to do things you don't want to do, and then get a job doing something you don't want to
do. 100%. And so I got out of school in 2015 and was like, I hate this. And I figured out that a lot of the personal finance and sort of finance coaching people that I followed on the internet made money doing this. And I thought that was interesting. And I had a background in teaching and tutoring. So I tutored math and I taught piano lessons when I was in high school and college. And I really liked teaching. I really liked money. And I was like, I wonder if I could figure out a way to do this. Started making YouTube videos, and one thing led to another. A couple years in, a lot of my clients would have small businesses. And so we started taking the budget that we were using on the personal side and just applying it to their business. And so I've been doing this now since about 2018. And then over the last few years, we've really been ramping up to focus on small business owners as well as, and sort of because for small business owners, your life and your business are so intertwined. And so it became this thing where it was like, I can't really help you in your personal life unless we're talking about the business too. And so we started taking a lot of the same stuff and applied it there. And so, in terms of how I got into it, it was like just super organic. Just one thing led to another. And I mean, I can share more, but I don't know if that answers your question. So
No, it does. And I think it sheds a light on, I think, why you're so good at what you do. And I don't know if I've told you this before, but I like to watch people that are really good do their thing. And there's been times when I've either watched you put together videos or been on a call with you, and I'm like, oh, I see what he did there. Like, he took something very complex and he gave it to me like I'm an idiot, because that was what was needed right there at that moment. And the reason we wanted to have you on, obviously, and the reason that we love working with you is because money is the root of a lot of people's issues. And I don't mean they have enough or they don't have enough. I mean fundamentally, emotionally, how they deal with money.
totally.
And that is a lot of what you do, in addition to providing the tools and the principles to do that. But a lot of what you've done and highlighted for us and many of the people that we work with inside of Affiliate U is how you should view and use money, at which point it changed everything. I mean, I think we launched everything in late December, and it's May, or it's almost May now. We already have gyms that are a month or more ahead on their expenses, which is I'll get texts like that maybe once every 7 to 10 days, and I'm like, God, I'm so fired up for that. It's so badass to take the one thing that, I would say universally, it is the thing that gym owners come to the table with and they have issue with is money. Name the flavor of problem they have with money, but they have a problem with money. They don't have enough. They don't know where it's going. They got some traumatic shit with money that they're dealing with.
Yep.
So, I mean, I don't know, how do you want to start this conversation? I'm going to kind of let you drive here a little bit, because I think you're so good at it. You've talked to so many people about it, and you've worked with so many people,
Yeah. Let's just talk about let's do this. So there's one sort of key fundamental mindset shift that we have to make. So let's just dive into this aspect of it for why I do it the way I do it, why we use the tools that we use, and the thing that really helped you, especially with CrossFit Rife, go oh, whoa, right? And so it's there's a handful of mindset shifts that we work on making, but there's one in particular, one that matters most, and it is stopping looking at the bank account to make decisions, and instead looking at all of the cash that you have in your budget and giving it a job. And so if anybody has any history with personal finance or personal budgeting, there's something that's called zero-based budgeting or envelope-based budgeting. Those are terms that are thrown around a lot in personal finance. And the idea is that if you have 10 grand in your business checking account right now, and let's just say you and I are sitting across your kitchen table, and I just dump your checking account onto the table and I say, all right, Fern, here's all your money. What do we need to do? You might say, all right, well, today's April 24th. We're running payroll on Friday, and I'm going to need $4 grand for that. So cool. Let's take $4 grand off the 10 and let's put it over here with a little sticky note that says payroll. All right, what else you got? And you're like, well, I need to order some stuff from Amazon. We're running low on supplies, so I probably need $150 for that. Great. Set $150 aside for that. What else? And I'm going to keep asking you, what else, until we finish the next 6 days, because the next 6 days are the end of April. And so let's say that you've got 10 grand in the account. We've thought through the next 6 days, and we know that we've allocated all the money for everything that's going to happen in the next 6 days. And now you got, 6 grand left or 5 grand left in the account, let's call it. Cool. So we got 5 grand left in the checking. What else? And this is typically where I start to get objections, because people go, well, but we got money coming in. I got memberships that are going to get, into the account tomorrow. And I know I got money coming in. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I don't care about that. we only care about the cash in your bank account right now because that's all you can use. And so what else do you need to do? And you go, well, crap, I got building rent that's due on May 1st. Great. Let's set aside money for that, right? And pretty soon you're going to run out of money. And we're going to have assigned all of the money in your bank account. And you kind of mentioned a second ago, people saying, oh, I'm a month ahead. What does that mean? Well, it means that if we mapped out all of your expenses in a given month, that you're able to show up on May 1st and the entire month is ready to go. So without any revenue that you make in May, the month of May's expenses are planned for and allocated. And then what happens is you can put all of the money that you make in May into June. The mindset shift, the reason this is important and the reason this works is because we transition you from going, all right, one of my coaches said the rowing machine broke and we probably need to get a new rower. That's going to be like whatever, $900. Do we have enough money to do that? Historically, you might look at your checking account and go, yeah, we got 10 grand in there. So sure, order a new rowing machine. But then what you're not realizing is that of the 10 grand in your bank account, the amount that you have set aside for equipment might be like $200 because all that other money is already allocated for next month's rent and the Amazon supplies you need and payroll that you got to make on Friday and everything else you got going on. And so now if you really want to get a rowing machine, you have to determine where am I going to pull from? Mm-hmm. Where am I going to cut? What trade-off am I going to make in order to make this happen? And so that's sort of the big mindset shift is shifting away from looking at your bank account to actually looking at your plan, your budget to make a decision.
So one of the things that I kind of note this is for me personally. So like I would largely describe my relationship with money in the past. Yeah. Thanks, Brian. So Brian said he's at Mid-State CrossFit, which is there's going to be a dope piece that we've done on Brian that'll come out with him. Shout out to Nate for putting that together. But he said Mid-State CrossFit has been using Nix for what was that, Cody? 2 months?
Yeah, a couple months.
Oh, yeah, system for 2 months is powerful. It's super powerful. I would have to have put my relationship with money into a big bucket just called fear.
Yeah.
I just used the money from a fear kind of standpoint. Like I was always worried I wouldn't have enough. I was worried I wouldn't be able to use it where I wanted to use it. I would be worried I'd have too much debt. And I would tell you, even with scenarios that I'm not super happy about, I no longer fear money. Like it's just like, oh, you have to do this. And I'm like, that's definitely not in the plan. That's a shit deck of cards that you just dealt me. However, I'm not afraid of the scenario. Like I can now fix it. I know exactly how long it's going to take. I know any of those scenarios now that we've done it. And that's probably been the most powerful thing for me is like, even if things get a little tight, I'm not afraid of it anymore. Yeah. I know exactly if I did need to make drastic decisions, I would know exactly how I'm going to do it. If I might not even have to, because I'm like, oh, well, that expense isn't coming up for 6 months. It's fully budgeted. I'll pull it back now and move it over here. And then I can replan for that moving forward. So that's probably the biggest thing for me is it's actually because I've heard people say, you have to treat money like an employee. And I'm like, well, that's a cool thought. I don't know how the fuck to do that.
What does that mean? Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And it's like, this is the first time I've ever been able, and my background was in finance acquisition, like I did. But I had never, and I've done Profit First. I've read all the Dave Ramsey books. We've done all of it, but I've never had a grasp of it to this degree. And it feels really good.
So let's dig into this idea of fear for a second. Cause I get that a lot. And it comes from sometimes a couple different places. One of the quotes I want to share that like really I think about a lot. And this is I first heard about this, I think from CrossFit Mayhem, and I'll share why with this what their sort
Nick is a CrossFitter too, by the way. Just so
yeah. I started. I'm a new. I would say I'm a relatively new CrossFitter, right? So like I got into it. I got really into watching the games in 2020, and then I joined a gym at the beginning of 2021, January. So relatively pretty new. So there's this quote from the movie Dune. I don't know if you've seen that movie or read the book by Frank
The
Herbert.
new one or the old one?
It's in both. The quote
Okay.
is in both. It's like a famous quote from the book. But it's fear is the little death. I'm going to butcher this now. Fear is, hold on, let me just read it so I don't butcher it.
Actually, you can have Cody pull it up. That's what he's here for, young Cody.
Oh, Cody.
Because we don't have a young Katie anymore. She's old now. She turned 30.
Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. So it's this idea that the problem with fear most of the time is that it very rarely the thing that you're afraid of is going to lead to a death or a terrible outcome. Instead, it's the fear of that thing that paralyzes you, which guarantees a terrible outcome. Because when you're paralyzed, you're not going to move through it, right? And so I think about that quote a lot. And then one of the things I talk about a lot to the CrossFit Mayhem point is, they do this whole like into the storm thing, and like they have like their bison as like their big heat logo and stuff, and that comes from the fact that like bison are one of the only animals that when a storm is coming, they actually walk into the thing rather than away from it. And so the whole idea of going, if you just sit and you let that storm come, or if you try to outrun it, turn around the other way, when you think about that storm coming right this direction, if you're trying to outrun it, the amount of time you're going to be in that storm is going to be way longer. Whereas if you just face the thing and walk into it, the amount of time that you're going to sit in that storm is going to be much less. And so when it comes to like YNAB and budgeting, so many people, what they're afraid of is that fear of the unknown, and that fear of like, I just don't want to look at my numbers. I don't want to log in and deal with this. I don't want to think about the fact that my affiliate fee is coming up in 3 months. I don't want to think about like property taxes that are coming up. And the problem is that then what happens is you just guarantee that your money's going to be a mess. But to your point, when you actually put it in there and look at it and think about it and see it, you're like, oh, well, this actually isn't as bad as I thought.
Well, sometimes it can be. Sometimes. But
like,
I would agree with you.
If it's a plan, you can make a plan of how to deal with it.
Right. And I think that's probably the big takeaway. It is very rarely that bad. It's usually, it's usually not great, not because you weren't doing anything with it.
Totally.
Right. And then you open it up and you're like, okay, cool. I can deal with this, and I can deal with many other problems. Like if you've got credit card debt and you like, I just can't pay this down. Like there's solutions to all of those. Like we had our my insurance bill for the gym was just came due, and I paid it. I pay it every year, but this year felt particularly good when I paid it, because I looked in there and I was like, I have the exact dollar figure for that set aside right now.
Yes.
And I sent it over, and they're like, this is the fastest anybody's ever paid their insurance bill. Like they sent me the invoice. I was like, paid right now, done.
That's so funny.
And it was because it wasn't that I didn't have money before, but it's because like I had been planning for it. I knew exactly what that was going to come up to. I've been budgeting it every single month. I like filled it up. I was like budgeted for, boom. And I was like excited to pay that bill because I was prepared for it. Yeah. Versus every other year, I'm like, maybe they won't send me my insurance bill this March, they have every year for the past 14 years.
It's hilarious, right? It's like when I do personal budgeting, I'm like, hey, when does Christmas happen? And it's like, oh, December 25. Yeah, every year.
Every year.
And you're gonna.
My wife's birthday's the same day this year. Damn it.
Every time. Yeah.
So where did that question go? Real quick. So I think it was somebody. Was it personal, or he doesn't have a business? Was that from from Jonathan Ortega? So Jonathan, you don't own a CrossFit business. You can still use this. So like Nick, you started in personal on the personal side, right? And then So technically, I think YNAB, which is you need a budget, YNAB, is
they market it as a personal tool.
It's a personal tool, but you absolutely, and we've built a fantastic course for all of our affiliates to go through in Affiliate U, and it's a game changer, man. Like it is legit. Like Nick did a fantastic job putting it together and simplifying it, because it's you're right, it's not intuitive. But I think one of the big things is like, and dude, we see it in there. I'm like, have you started the budget course? They're like, no. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, and I'm like, listen, I was you. I
Yeah.
also didn't want to look at the bank account either.
Totally.
Like you have to get in there and you have to fix it. But dude, it's literally the first thing. It is now part of my morning routine. I go in there, I do my white dots every day. 3 different businesses, takes me like 5 minutes. Doesn't take
It's
long.
not much. And it also, like, the other thing with it is I tell people a lot of the times you will eventually get to a place where you kind of start like you crave it. Like you will go from I don't want to ever look at this. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to think about budgeting to it's like brushing your teeth and you start to
Mhm.
feel gross when you don't do it.
That's a
Like,
fair statement. I'm like,
I
I'm
need to do this.
I'm a piece of garbage. I haven't done my thing in a couple
Yes.
days.
Yes.
Dude, you're right. You're so right. I feel so disorganized, and I feel like if I don't do it, I'm like, oh, dude, what am I doing with my life? Like and I think the other reason it specifically appeals to CrossFitters is because of the quantification of it and
Totally.
almost the gamification of it is why I think like we have gyms that pick it up and they're like, oh my God, this is the best. And I'm like, right, it's a game that you can now stack money.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're broke, right? That's the beauty of it, right? Like even if you didn't have like all the money that you wanted, very rarely, and Nick, you know this better than anybody, very rarely is more money going to solve somebody's problems
Totally.
if they do
Oh my
not
gosh.
have this together.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the stories I like to tell is I was doing a coaching call on this is personal side. This has been like 2 or 3 years ago now. And I was doing it for a group. I don't know. We had maybe 15 people on the call. Now, when I do group coaching like this, because money is so personal and so like deeply, deeply personal, most of the time people don't know about what other people are doing or have. And so they only know what other people share. But I tend to know a little bit more about what's going on with everybody on the call.
Right.
And we had these 2 ladies on this one call, and I knew that one of these women, her personal take-home income that hit her bank account every single month was $2,000 a month after taxes. That's what she was budgeting with. And I also knew that this other lady on the same call had a personal take-home income of about $80,000 a month.
Otherwise a millionaire.
Right. And that's a year. It's not even $1 million. That's like, I make $1 million a year. And we were having the same conversation. And these 2 ladies are talking back and forth and, oh my gosh, I struggle with that too. They don't know this about each other. Right. And it's like, but they're having the same issues. And that's what I tell people all the time. Like, yes, more money helps. Okay. I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't help. It freaking helps. But it will not solve your problems. And so you have to learn how to efficiently manage the money that you have so that when you get more money, you have a plan for what to do with it.
I have used the YNAB kind of reference in all sorts of other places when people are like, I just need more members. And I'm like, do you need more members? Or would you be better off if you could keep the ones that you had? And then it would be actually easier for you to grow because you wouldn't need 11, you would need 3. And so it's the exact same formula, which is just like, just manage what you have better. Because if you do that, then growing, whatever it is, your gym, your bank account, whatever, it's significantly easier.
Yeah.
Now you get to actually use the concept of compounding the way it's supposed to work.
Totally. Well, and also it's really eye-opening too, right? Because in terms of when you really admit to yourself and you work in all the stuff that we're talking about, right? So like you work in an event that you run in the fall and we take that and we break that down monthly. And then you work in your insurance that you have annually in March and you break that down monthly. And then you have your affiliate fee and you break that down monthly. And you take all these things that typically will throw you off and we break it down into a monthly nut. Now we can see what the gym actually costs to operate on a monthly basis. And then from there, we can set revenue targets that are meaningful. And so actually that's something that let me shift gears slightly and let's back this up a little bit more because I think like one of the things that's helpful, especially like who was it? Was it Bridget? I think I saw that who was like, I look at the bank account and pray.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, everyone does. That's what most people do is like, yeah, totally get that. And so what I want to back up for is, and I say this a lot, I've said this to so many people in Affiliate U, that is, I do the exact same thing that you do. You just do it for health and fitness. I do it for money, but we do the same job. And the reason I say that is because to use this like let's use a health and fitness analogy for a second. When people first come to the gym, brand new person comes in, hey, I'd like to try out a class, or I'm thinking about joining. What are the reasons that that person might be there?
Well, the one that is probably the most paramount, but that not everybody says, is accountability.
Great. And what do they want accountability for?
To actually just show up.
Okay. And why do they want to show up?
Because they're typically unhappy about something, either the way they look, the way they feel, or what they cannot do.
Right. And we could keep playing this game. And why are they unhappy with the way they look or feel or something they can't do? And we can dig deeper. And maybe the answers are like, I don't feel very confident. Or maybe the answers are, I just had a kid and I want to be able to like run around the yard with them. Or maybe the answers are like, I've got a grandson now and I'd like to be able to pick him up. And I can't do that. Or maybe the answers are, I was really athletic in high school and college, and then I just kind of let myself go. And I just kind of want to get back into it. And I really enjoyed that. And that brought a lot of meaning to my life. Right. The point is, we want to dig a little bit deeper to understand why someone wants to get fit and healthy in the first place, because that's going to drive them. Now, eventually, maybe you like CrossFit because you just like CrossFit. And that happens, I think, over time. But I think most of the time, my guess is when people first show up, they are unhappy, like you said, with something else going on in their life, and trying to get healthier is going to help them. Is that fair?
No, it's completely fair. Like, I'll share mine. Mine was like, my parents recently just retired, and my mom, and we were driving them from Louisiana to Florida. And my mom asked me, she said, hey, because this is my mom, just like out of nowhere, she'll just ask a really imposing question. She's like, so where did your father and I fail as parents? And I was like, there's no lead in for that, Mom. Like, just right to it. Just like, we're just like, oh, how's the weather? How did we fail as parents? And I said,
was this because you were doing something in your life that she disapproved of and was thinking like, how did I fail you? I must have screwed up. Okay.
No, my mom is a career-long social worker, and
Okay,
she has no time for pleasantries. Like, it's just, it is actually pains her to do small talk. She wants to talk about meaningful shit.
Real stuff.
Yeah. And I said, you guys didn't teach us anything about money. She's like, well, we didn't. I was like, nope, you didn't. Like, both my sister has a master's degree, like I have higher education, like, and I was like, and there are many things you guys did not teach us about money. And so my why is like, I don't want to pass on that trait to my kids. I want my kids to understand money, and I don't want them to live half of their lives being in fear of money, understanding that money is a tool. And if you know how to use said tool, you could do pretty much whatever you want, particularly when we're talking about money.
Totally.
Totally.
So the reason I asked is because, exactly like what you said, if you know why you want to do this, then you can understand that, oh, I do need to get into the budget and keep it up to date. And so, kind of like going to the other end, we spent the first few minutes of today talking about some of the stuff that we're going to be having you like, that I want people to do. I want you to look at your budget instead of your bank account. I want you to have categories that plan for the future. I want you to work all this in there. I want you to look at it before you buy something. But just like working out, you're not going to do that because it's hard unless you have a very strong reason for why you should be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you, it's, I don't want to pass on these like poor financial beliefs and these poor money habits to my kids. And that's a strong reason, so that you're like, that means I need to freaking get in there in my budget every single day. I need to look at this thing before I make decisions, because if I do that, that's going to help set me up to achieve this much bigger thing down the road. And so the same thing is true for CrossFit gym owners. Like, okay, cool. Why do you want to own a gym? Whatever that reason is.
Most people are like, I want to change people's lives. I want to help people. Like,
and so that's a killer reason. Cool. And so can you change people's lives if the gym goes out of business and goes bankrupt?
No.
And so don't you think we should have a game plan for how we can manage the money in the gym so that we can keep doing this, so that we can keep changing people's lives?
Yeah. And gym owners are notoriously the worst. Like, I have done So one of the things we do when somebody on board, so I've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these, is something called a money map exercise. And I can tell you with a strong degree of confidence, and strong being damn near absolute, that I have not gotten one person out of every single gym that we have worked with that has to the penny accurately input their numbers, whether it's the number of memberships they have, their expenses. And I know this because I too run a business. And when you have whole numbers in the things, I'm like, these are not correct. Or if I'm like, hey, how many, these numbers don't add up. They're like, oh, well, it's so
It's
what had
close.
happened was, you
Yeah.
know, and I was just like, oh God, you know. So so anybody who has any sort of like shame or fear with regard to this, like, know that it's everybody, even the gym owners who like are pretty well put together, still struggle in this arena. Everybody.
Totally. Well, I mean, and that's where, like, you know, that's why I came into starting working with you guys. You know what I mean? Like, you guys are crushing it and doing a lot. You're doing great with CrossFit Rife, and like, but even then, you're still like, man, it's just really hard to know how to make decisions if I'm just looking at the bank account. Like, and I
Right.
can't predict what's happening. I don't know what's going on. You know, and so it's I think a lot of people, I had somebody say to me one time, well, one day I'm just going to make enough money where I don't need to budget. I'm like, that's not how this works.
No.
Like, imagine, and I told somebody this one time who said that, and I said, tell me if this makes sense. I have now achieved peak physical fitness, and I'm like, I'm just crushing on every single metric. Been in the gym for 15 years. I'm killing it. I'm just not going to work out for the next, I don't know, 5 years, because I'm like, I'm good.
You're good.
Does that make any sense?
It makes zero sense. And
Yeah.
but this is the same thing when a gym owner says, well, I don't want 300 members. And I'm like, do you not want 300 members? Or what you're really saying, I don't know how to get 300 members. And it's just like, I don't need to manage my money. I'm like, well, do you not know how to manage your money? Because it's a different statement.
Yeah.
And that was me. And I think probably the biggest distinction here with YNAB is like what you are truly teaching people, and what we want gym owners to know is like, how do you manage your cash flow? So if we're going to talk about the business, we're like, there's budgeting, and really what we're talking about is managing your cash flow, knowing
Totally.
where every penny goes, and being able to make, like you said, educated decisions, which the downstream effect of being able to make educated decisions helps with so many things, and it reduces so many conflicts that gym owners have with regard to communicating with their staff, communicating with their members, because if the gym owner doesn't know where their money is and somebody wants a refund, they get super pissy about it because they already have bad feelings about money, and now they know that this is really going to hurt. Or the staff is making recommendations and the box order doesn't want to say that we don't have enough money for that, but what they're really saying is, I have no idea where my money's going and I have not budgeted for that, and what you just threw me was a curveball, and now I have animosity towards you. And if any of this sounds familiar, everybody, like, this is how it works.
Yeah.
And if you don't fix these things, then you will continue to have business issues. You'll continue to have leadership issues because you cannot communicate unemotionally. You'll continue to have a revolving door of team. You'll continue to interact with your members poorly. The list goes on and on and on. And it all goes back to this, which is like, if you just manage that. And I'm also not referring to like, you're just overflowing with cash, like you're just printing money. I'm just referring to like, you have a firm grasp of where your money goes and how you spend it.
Totally. Yeah. No, I mean, it's so like two things come to mind when you say that. Number one, it is 100% tied to the emotions. And I mean, there are times where Hannah and I knows this. I'm like the king of this. Like, part of the
Hannah's your
reason
wife.
Hannah's my wife. I'm sorry. Hannah's my wife. We've been married for 9 years, coming up on 9 years. And the reason I tell you that is because 9 years ago, I was in a totally different space emotionally with money. And we don't necessarily have to get totally all the way into it, but like, we have learned so much about each other over the last decade as it relates to money, because like most people, I too am deeply impacted by what's going on with my money. And I've worked very hard to separate my mindset and emotions from what's going on in my budget, but I'm human. And one of the things that stresses me out is unexpected spending, unexpected expenses that trip me up. And so, because of that, I've now worked very hard to make sure that part of the budget is planning for those things. Because to your point, if I'm stressed out about money, Hannah and I are not going to have a good day. I'm going to be a jerk at home, and that's not going to be healthy. Then we're going to get into a fight. Then I'm going to go to work. I'm not going to do well. And like at the gym, that's even heightened, right? I mean, I'm sure that there are times where you have shown up and like people can just tell, like,
We should not go in his office right now.
Something's up. Something's up, right? Like, everything okay, man? Like, and you know, it could be any number of things, but a lot of the times it is money, right? And like, you're not gonna bring on new members. You're not going to sell from a healthy place. You're not going to coach from a healthy place. You're not going to do any of that stuff. And so that revolving door makes.
I don't want to overlook what you just said. You're not going to show up from a healthy place. And I know people think that they can fake this. You can't.
No.
Even the best professionals, it will make its way to that interaction with the client, to that class that you're coaching, to that conversation with a coach. I promise you, I know you're like, no, I can separate it. I'm good. This is not the person that shows up to my class. I'm like, bullshit. That is the person that shows up to that sales consult with a scarcity mindset, who's deeply unhappy, and it has a significant impact. And it's because we're not addressing the root cause, which is like, we need to figure out how to manage our money so that we can put it to work the best way possible.
Totally. It's, and that's why I said earlier, like when I first started working with people, I started working on the personal side, but then like I started working with a lot of these people that were small business owners. And I was like, oh yeah, we can't do anything on the personal side unless we're talking about your business too, because it's all intertwined. Like, you're human. You're not a robot. You're not
Right.
Spock. You're human. And so that means that you are deeply impacted by what's going on personally, and that impacts the business, that impacts the gym, that impacts, and so what's happening with your money just heightens.
So we've talked about some of the emotional stuff here. We've probably, unearthed some real disgusting emotions for some of the people that are listening, but that's okay. That's how it works. So let's talk about what's some of the most important, like pertinent or important information that people need to know with regard to like cash flow management, as if they're going to start like dabbling in a budget, whether it's a spreadsheet or a YNAB or anything else.
Yeah. So the way that you want to go through this, right, is thinking through some of these mindset shifts that we talked about. The biggest one being only looking at the money in your bank account and budgeting that out to see how long it's going to last. But before you even do that, you really need to transition a lot of your expenses into some sort of monthly number. And so that's the first thing that I'm going to do when I'm working with somebody is I'm like, all right, we just need to make a list. What are all your expenses? Right. And so if I'm looking at like a gym budget, we've got affiliate fees, we got building rent, we got any debt payments you got, we got education and coaching. Maybe you're buying a book or courses or hiring a coach for yourself. You got equipment, you got an event, you got obviously your coach payroll, you got insurance, and then you got marketing costs, software costs, right? There's a number of things, maybe 12, 15 categories, something like that. And so we're going to break all that out. And if you've been paying a bookkeeper or if you have books, right, let's go look at those and at least see what the averages are so we can start pulling together some of these numbers. If you don't have any bookkeeping or you haven't been keeping up, then cool, let's just start today. And so like the first thing I would tell people is commit to like 1 to 2 months of simply tracking. So you're not really trying to like change anything. You're not really trying to budget the way most people think about it. You're just committing to tracking. And that gives us some sort of baseline for what's going on. And so, like I said, making those a monthly number. And so that would mean, let's use like the affiliate fee is really easy. So if you're a box owner and you got a $3,000 a year affiliate fee, let's say that thing is due in November of this year. How many months we got? Like, what is that? 6 months, 7 months from now? So if we take 3,000 divided by 7, That's going to be a monthly cost of $428 a month. Now, obviously, over time, if we can get ahead, that'll drop, saving for next year's affiliate fee.
Right.
But for this year, you better start budgeting $428 a month to make sure that you're good to go by that coming due in November. That's what I mean when I say monthly. So all of those annual things that you pay for, insurance, affiliate fees, property taxes, if you own your building, all those things we're going to divide by however many months we have until the next one's due. That gets us a monthly number. And so once we do that, we put in our monthly payrolls, our monthly this, equipment, divide that, yada, 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 yada. We're going to come up with a total operating cost. That number could be $6,000. That number could be $26,000, right?
Mhm.
But whatever that number is, that allows us to at least see, cool, this is our monthly nut that the gym must make. Because what a lot of people don't know that number because of all those annual expenses that throw things off. And they'll be like, well, last month it was 15, this month it was 20. I don't know. And so that's why we spend some real time on the front end to get that number. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that was one of the way that you lay that out for everybody to make it stress-free, which is like same thing we tell people with like their food is like, I don't want you to change anything. I just want you to write down everything they eat just so that we actually know what it is.
Totally.
Because what you will find out in that scenario is like, oh, I spend way more on music subscriptions than I actually thought I did. It's like $200 and I had in my mind that it was 35 and turns out it was $165 more than that. And what you'll find out in this whole process just by going in there and just looking at it and figuring out what each one of those are is like, there's a lot more money there than you think in most instances. You're just not spending it where you want to spend it. It just all gets lost in the shuffle.
It's 100% the same as that. And that's where like, I probably kind of annoy people with the number of like food or health and fitness things, but it's like,
It's the same.
It's the same this morning. So Hannah and I, we've kind of fallen off track with some of our eating over the last few months because we've been moving and life's been crazy and I'm getting back into it. So I've committed for the next little bit. I'm going to start tracking all my macros again. And so this morning, I pour my coffee. I put my normal amount of creamer, just eyeball it, like the normal amount of creamer I use.
1 quart.
Dude, it's 88 milliliters for this creamer and it's 176 calories. And I'm like, my gosh, I've probably been drinking like 3 or 4 of these a day. No wonder I'm not. Like, it's the same thing. And so like for now, I'm just tracking. I'm just tracking right now. I'm going to get a baseline for what in the world I've been doing. And because I got to get back on it. But it's the same thing with money. So it's like, just commit to tracking. Figure out, like Amazon will kill people, right? That one will kill you because you're like, oh, it's just $20, order that. And another $33, another $40, another 20 here. And all of a sudden you're $500 on Amazon in a month. Yeah.
That would be a great month.
It'd be a great month. Yeah.
Nick. Yeah. I'd be like, only 500. Well done, dear.
Great.
You crushed it this month. Yeah.
Great. So that's the first step. So your question of like, baseline, right? Is like, that's the first step. And when I'm talking here, I'm serious. I'm very much so talking about personal and business, right? So it's like your gym budget should be pretty lean. Like really, I think the budget that I use as a baseline for a gym is like 25 categories. So it's like, and that's paying yourself, saving for taxes, that's everything, right? And so you don't need that many categories. A personal budget is typically a little more depending on how detail oriented you want to get. I typically tell people to try and keep it as simple as possible when you're starting out. But getting that baseline is really, really important. It's especially important if as the owner, you rely on income from the gym, right? And so that's where getting your personal number is incredibly important because let's just use easy math. Let's say that your personal number is $8,000. You do all this, you figured out I need $8,000 a month, pay my mortgage, buy groceries, buy crap on Amazon, pay for the kids' clothing, whatever. And let's say that, your spouse makes $4,000. It's like, cool. Well, I need the gym to pay me $4,000. And so that helps us then go to the gym budget and figure out, all right, well, how do we make that work, right? How do we make that happen? And it's all coming from this sort of bigger picture vision that we talked about earlier, this bigger picture why of what matters to you and getting clear on like, okay, well, if this is what I'm going for, what do I need personally? And then how do I make sure that I then go to the gym and make sure the gym can help me support that. Or if maybe the gym can't afford to pay me that yet, now I know what I'm working towards and I have a why behind what I'm working towards, not just some arbitrary number of hitting 150 members because it sounds cool,
Right.
but being able to hit this many members because that means I can pay myself this and that means I can do whatever else in my personal life.
So I think that's the one of the big key takeaways is like it allows you to make that decision, because a lot of gym owners, I mean, Nick, you see all of them anyway, but coming in like, what do you pay myself? I'm like, whatever's left at the end of the month. And I'm like,
Totally,
oh,
yeah.
I'm like, let's try a different method. So so we've had a couple questions in here, and I know a lot of people have done Profit First, and we've had some questions about like Dave Ramsey. Is there a way to just kind of succinctly distinguish between some of the methods that we're using here and those two philosophies?
Yeah. So Profit First and Dave Ramsey and our philosophy, all three of them fundamentally at the core are saying the exact same thing. The implementation is slightly different. We can talk about it, but at the core, all of them, Mike McCowitz at Profit First and Dave, and then what I'm trying to do here at the core is saying, take stuff seriously, figure out what's going on, and pay yourself first. Meaning, sit down and do the math and figure out what's happening, make a budget, understand your baseline numbers, and then when revenue comes in the door, don't freaking spend it, allocate it to whatever it needs to go to. Dave Ramsey's pretty funny, and I like Dave Ramsey. Don't hear me like hate on him, but he's pretty funny to me because he is one of the world's biggest advocates for envelope-based budgeting. But his budgeting tool, EveryDollar, allows you to budget with fake money, which is insane. It allows you to budget with projected income. Rather than
I never could figure it out, so I never got that far. I did the same thing I did with YNAB originally. I was just like, I can't figure this out.
And so it's crazy to me. I don't know why they do that. It's like so anti the rest of his method, which makes no sense. But they basically allow you to go, what is your typical monthly income? And then they let you budget with that, whether or not you actually have that money in your bank account or not.
Okay.
Which doesn't help you, because if your budget says you can pay rent, but you don't have money in the bank account to pay rent, what?
Right.
And so, okay, so that's sort of that aside. But what he speaks, what his method is the same. Mike McCowitz with Profit First, it is literally basically the exact same as what I'm trying to get you to do. He just does it with bank accounts, whereas we go, well, that's a lot of work. Let's just use categories and YNAB and get way more clarity to it.
Well, what I was going to say is like YNAB is kind of the best of all of them,
100%.
at least from my experience, meaning like the envelopes are the categories inside YNAB, and then you no longer need the bank accounts for Profit First. You can just create another category, if you will, and work it off of percentage-based accounting if you want as well. But it simplifies all the transfers. You don't drive your accountant bonkers. Like, it's not costing you extra money for all this other stuff. It's way easier. And then with YNAB, it's like you are kind of you're definitely more on top of it than the accountant, because you should be going in there and classifying transactions every single day, like boom, 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 boom. So that's why I like it so much, because once I learned it, and it didn't take me long. I think maybe like 2 30-minute phone calls with you, and I was like, oh, I get it now. Where I would have never figured out a lot of that on my own for many reasons. So. Okay, so I think, again, Profit First is a principle. I think I see YNAB as the tool that actually helps you really execute that and implement that really, really well. And it does take the envelope system and actually digitize it and make it significantly easier. You don't have to do everything with cash. I know there was something else, like from a controversial standpoint, what do you see as being like some of the biggest controversies inside of budgeting, or even like your principles and methodology?
So, and let me answer. I'll answer that, but let me hit Robbie's question just real quick while we're talking about methods. So, what's my take on Mint? Again, Mint has the exact same problem that EveryDollar has, which is the budgeting portion of that allows you to budget with money that you do not yet have. Right. And so it's hard to explain this without like you literally seeing it in YNAB, but you cannot take projected income and say like, well, I know my gym typically does around this much money per month, and then start to budget with that. because YNAB goes, yeah, cool. You might typically do around 12 grand a month, but you have $2,000 in the checking account right now. So you can't go and buy whatever because you only got 2 grand.
I would explain this, Nick, as just like it does not allow you to do the mental gymnastics to circumvent your own actual cash flow.
Yes.
It's like there are red flags that pop up everywhere when you're using, like the credit card one is a perfect one, Nick. So like the way anybody who's not used it, YNAB does not treat credit cards any differently. If you spend money on a credit card, YNAB, if you spend $1,000 on there, it'd be like you just ate up $1,000 of cash. It does not allow you to like be like, well, I'll pay it off later. So be like, you are now in the red. You do not have enough money to cover this, and you're gonna have to steal from it later.
Yes.
So it starts to really expose a lot of the
places that you hide.
Right, where you hide or you lie to yourself or you try to justify spending things on certain areas. And like that's what I like about it the most, is it just pummels you with your own nonsense.
Yes, 100%. And so that's it basically forces you to admit, like if you went back, like let's go back to the 1950s, credit cards don't exist and everything operates in cash. YNAB forces that behavior,
right,
but allows you to keep obviously using all of the technology and digital stuff that we have today. And that's the game-changing point. And so it forces you to not rack up debt subconsciously. It forces you that if you're going to go into debt, you're going to admit it to yourself.
There's no hiding in YNAB. Yeah. Like if you're behind, it's just like red everywhere. It's just like, you're terrible at this. So, I mean, they've done a fantastic job, like from a gamification, a psychological standpoint, to visually display like your penalties. Like, oh dude, you're blowing it right now. Like this is going to be and even if it's just for a little bit, it gives me anxiety. Like even if I know and I'm like, oh, that's just money that hasn't come in yet. I'm just like, oh, we have to fix that like right now. Like, we cannot be in the red.
Yes. You know? Yeah. Well, and it's real, because the point, the reason it goes red is because the money's gone.
Right.
And so
you don't actually have that money.
You don't have the money anymore, right? So yeah, that's like why I use this. And look, I don't work for YNAB. I don't get paid to like go around and promote them. I chose them in 2015 when I was looking for a better budgeting tool for myself, because they have this one fundamental key feature that I'm talking about, and so that's why I like it, and that's why I use it. Okay, so back to your question, you had like sort of what's controversial about my approach or what we're doing. So I have probably 2 things that I would say to this. Number one is I'm actually not a fan of outsourcing this, especially early on or at first. It doesn't mean you should never outsource budgeting, but if you're the owner, if you are running your business and you own your business, you need to know your numbers. Like the cash is the lifeblood of your business. And so I get it. It's tempting. You're like, well, I just want to hire a bookkeeper and just let them handle it because I want to focus on building the gym and coaching and helping people. And I'm like, I get it. But if you run a business, you have to know your numbers. And so,
but those are separate. Like, and I don't want to go by that either. Like your accountant is there to rectify your books so that you can file taxes. That is where their job ends. They are not there to manage your cash flow to make your business healthy. I don't care if they're a profit first accountant. They are not going to come in and be like, oh, you should spend a little bit less money. They're just like, here's your P&L. Turns out you're in the negative. We just billed you $400 and we'll see you again next month. Like they're not going to fix it. This is to manage, like you are, and I will go on a statement, like you should not outsource this. You can have somebody do your books. You should not have somebody else manage your cash flow. Like, unless you are running like a large company, like, and you're the CEO and that's not your job. And I don't mean like the, in air quotes, you're the CEO of your small business. That pisses
like
me off too.
Company,
You should be doing this, because nobody knows it. Like you're the one spending that money. It's just easier for you. But B, you're the one that's going to be making the decisions on it. So you shouldn't have to ask somebody else what you should be, what can we do this and how and why. So you should absolutely be doing this. Outsource your accounting. Do not outsource like management of your cash flow. Totally. You cannot abdicate that responsibility as a business owner.
Totally agree. And that brings me to the next thing you said, which is like accounting, traditional accounting, that it's just for taxes. It's just because we live in a goofy country that makes the most ridiculous tax code in the world. And then like, that's it. Like, it's
That's it.
just for taxes. And so I don't care. Like, I'll get in arguments with accountants on Twitter and stuff. And it's like, they're like, cash-based budgeting, that's not accounting. I'm like, I don't care. Like, these are small business owners who need to be able to make decisions based on cash in the bank account.
Right.
So let's have a system that helps them understand their cash in the bank account.
Yeah, it's I guess I would succinctly put it like it forces you to operate with the way things actually are, not with the way people want the system to work. Which is like, yo, you have $5. You can't pretend like you have 100. You have 5.
Totally. Yep. And now, one thing I want to say that is important here is that there are two core features of the way we do this, right? So I don't let you budget or assign money that you do not physically have in the bank account. That doesn't mean we don't plan based on money coming. All right. And so it's like we use something called targets in YNAB, but it's effectively just saying, what's your game plan? Right. And so this is helpful for thinking down the road for what you want to do. I'll give you 2 examples. I've worked with, so we got somebody right now that I'm working with where they took out a construction loan to build a building. They built a new gym and we got a loan. Great. Now I got a crap ton of money sitting in the checking account. What do I do? Right. And it's like, cool. Okay. Let's create categories for plumbing, for electrical, for all the major different parts of this process that you're going to have to do. We're going to have a category for new equipment, a category for all this stuff. And let's start allocating that money down and creating targets based on when you think you're going to need to make progress payments to the contractor. And so we can do that. Another example is another gym where they're thinking about hiring a GM or another coach starting hopefully by the summer. Cool. Well, let's go ahead and create a category with a target for an extra $3,000 a month. And let's budget for it and just feel, how does the budget feel? It doesn't mean you're going to pay them right now. You haven't hired them yet. But you're thinking about hiring them, which means you're thinking about taking on this new added cost. So for the month of April, let's create a category with a target for that expense, and let's see how the gym operates this month. And so you can experiment when you're thinking about making bigger decisions by creating categories and creating plans and adding targets for them. And so I don't want people to think that because we aren't looking at or letting you budget with future money doesn't mean we aren't planning with future money.
Oh no, it's the exact opposite. It is an immense amount of planning, but only operating with what I have in my hand. I'm not, anybody that's not how it works. Like you cannot execute YNAB without a plan.
Totally.
Like, it's not how it works. It actually allows you to execute the plan significantly better. And it's the other thing that, and you're pretty big on this, Nick, is just like, the tool is not meant to restrict.
Yes.
It's actually meant to expand, right? So, meaning what I mean by that is not meant to restrict your spending. It's actually designed to help you spend more of it where you want it to go.
Yes. Yes. And that's where, like, so a lot of people will ask me, how do I build the habit of, looking at this thing? Because it feels restrictive. It feels like it's going to tell me I can't buy this when I really want to. Like, I don't want to, deal with this. How do I build the habit of looking at it? And almost always, I would say 90% of the time, when someone is not wanting to look at their budget to make a decision, it means that they either A, don't have a strong enough vision or why for behind what they're doing, or B, they have made it too restrictive and it's actually not aligned with their vision and their big picture stuff. And so it's like, you should be wanting to look at it because it should be a reminder of what's the most important to you. And that if I just stick to this, then I'm going to be able to achieve the bigger picture vision and goals that I have. And so it should be something you want to look at because it's going to put you on the path to that.
Yeah, things like, I want to be able to spend a certain amount of money on equipment maintenance in the gym. I want to be able to contribute to my coach's continuing education. Like, all of these things I put a plan in place. I start to make these targets. I start allocating it. And then it actually feels good to spend that money. Like I mentioned, like I referenced earlier, I don't feel good about spending money on my insurance, but like, I just worked out money for the team to do their level 4s coming up.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's in a category called team benefits.
Totally.
Right? And that feels great.
Yep. Well, and to your point, like, oh, I want to host a Christmas party, or I want to put on a killer event in October or whatever. It's like, cool. If you really, really want to do that, make it part of the budget. And then before you go buy something else random on Amazon or go buy new equipment because somebody said, oh, we need whatever. If you look and go like, oh crap, if I do that, I'm going to have to take from the event in October. I'm going to have to take from being able to buy level 4s for my coaches, or I'm going to have to take from these other things that I really, really want to do. That's not restrictive.
Right.
That's reminding you what you said is important. It's putting your money where your mouth is.
Well, it allows you to exercise probably one of the most important muscles as an entrepreneur or as a leader, which is no.
Yeah.
So, if people are like, hey, we need to do this, I'm like, no, it's not in the budget. Or like people have this like, oh, somebody so-and-so asked us to host a fundraiser of some sort. And I'm not really stoked about it. I'm like, well, you've not allocated your time correctly inside of the gym, meaning you don't have a gym calendar. Because if you had a gym calendar, you could easily say no because, oh, that weekend's already booked. We can't do that. Yep. Same thing here with the budget. It's like, hey, we want to buy, an ice cream cone machine for the fucking gym. And I'm like, we can't. That's not in the budget. We have to buy ab mats. Sorry, guys. Like, whatever. It just allows you to say no, but not in an emotional way. Like it's completely logical. Like, hey, that's literally not in the budget. We cannot do that. Or that's a fantastic idea. I'm going to move this money around because I actually don't really like where that money is sitting right now. Like we're not going to need that, or I changed my mind on it. I'm going to reallocate it somewhere else.
Totally. It just forces you to have that conversation about what's truly important. That's what it comes down to. That's all it comes down to.
So I know people, we briefly, I kind of briefly mentioned earlier, but like I asked you but when we first started, I was like, hey, what's your stance on credit cards? And you're like, well, let me ask you this. You're like, how do you feel about deadlifts? And I was like, good point. Like, don't deadlift like an idiot. And you're like, correct. Don't use credit cards like an idiot. And I was like, okay, touche. And what, like both in the gym and personally, like that's now how we use credit cards. We use credit cards for more now than we ever have.
Yeah.
But we use them intelligently, meaning like they get paid in full every single month. We never go over. And it's actually more beneficial now than it was before. Like the number of Amex points we have is alarming at this point.
Yeah.
But I don't fear that anymore. I know that money is allocated every single month. I'm like, I pay that thing off in full.
It really is. Like, it's very, very cool when you can get to a place where you're using them that way, because to your point, look, as a business, you're just always going to have more spending on a business than you do in your personal life. You just are. Like, that's how business works. And so if you can intelligently run a large amount of expenses through credit cards, you get a cool amount of points, right? And now we get to use those to travel or take the whatever, like super fun. But to your point, that means you have to use them intelligently, and you can't get wrecked by the credit card companies, which is what their game is. And so, I think I told you were like credit cards or whatever. And I was like, see, what a lot of people do is they go, deadlifts are hard. Sometimes they injure people. We're just not going to do deadlifts. And it's like,
right. I don't think
that doesn't make any sense.
And you're like, yeah. And I was just like, oh, cool. I was like, never mind. I get it now. Don't be a complete dummy. Well, but the issue was like, I had never had a means to track it, where again, like YNAB treats it no differently, which is like, if I put on the credit card or whether I pay with it of dollars, like it's the same in YNAB. So it's not allowing me to spend outside of actual cash.
Yes. And so that, to your point, right, the big mindset shift that we have with credit cards is people go from thinking, okay, what are my bills? Well, I got rent, I got utilities, I got insurance, I got phone, I got credit card bill, and they list it as a bill that they have to pay in the same way that they have other bills to pay. And it goes, no. We're going to start thinking about all the crap that you're buying on the credit card. And if we just plan and budget for all the actual spending that's happening on the credit card, then YNAB will magically move the money for you from those categories to the pay back the credit card company category. And you'll just have the money ready to pay the credit card. And so if you're actually thinking and planning for all the actual expenses, then you'll always have money to pay back the credit card company. And it, again, forces you to treat it like cash.
Right. Which is cool because then you get all sorts of points.
Totally. Yeah.
And none of the debt.
Yep. It's the best.
So go ahead.
I saw another question that I wanted to answer that I thought was really good. Trish said, how do you avoid catastrophic thinking when unlikely expenses pop up? say an unexpected pregnancy, or your RV needs a new transmission. So there are things that are truly, truly unexpected, right? There are. And so I don't want to dismiss that, but 95% of the time, the vast majority of the time, unexpected things are not actually unexpected in terms of will they occur, but they are unexpected in terms of when they will occur. And so if we just change our mindset to thinking about what likely will occur, we can plan for it. And so I would actually push back and say most unexpected things can be planned for and mitigated. And so on the gym side, we've already touched on a bunch of them, which are like these annual bills that we forget about and then all of a sudden come up. We've also got some others on the gym side that might come up, like, oh, well, the CrossFit Games, they're actually hosting like a semis or a quarters kind of near us. And so I'm thinking like maybe we should go, and I'd like to like, help maybe take some of the coaches or maybe pick up some meals with some of the coaches and like kind of make this a team building thing. Now, all of a sudden that was unexpected. Where do I pull that from? And it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, that kind of is unexpected, but not really. Like we could think about it and go, is there a chance that I would like to take coaches to an event? Yes. Cool. Let's have a category for it and plan it. We don't know what event, we don't know when, we don't know where and what city, but we know that there's a good chance we would like to do that. So let's admit that, have a category for it, and plan for it. On the personal side,
rower breaks.
The rower breaks. Yes,
the
totally.
lights, the lights
Yes.
break. The whatever. Just like that is a facility, a maintenance issue. And
Yes.
it's just like, hey, if I look at last year and it says that I spent $7,000 on all of those things, when I spent the money for all 7,000 of those, I was probably stressful instead of just having a budget that was,
Yes.
I don't know, $700 a month for it.
Yes.
And then what if it comes up that month? Great, I can cover it. If it doesn't, I just leave it there. And it's next
Yes.
month, it's 1,400. And then the month
Yes.
after, it's 2,100. And when the
Yes.
bill comes up, you're like, oh, that's not really unexpected. Because like that's a perfect one. It's like unexpected. And I'm like, what year of your ownership did something not break? Like name a year when fucking weightlifters didn't break the light switch in the bathroom or
Yes.
like anything else in the gym, because
Yes.
the weightlifters do. So it's like it's not unexpected. You're just not factoring it in.
Yes.
You're not acting as if the world is the way that it is. And it's like
Yes.
just factor it in.
Just think about it. Yes, just project. And on the personal side, I do this a lot with people because I go, okay, well, what phase of your life are you in? And so what do I mean when I say that? Well, like how old are your kids? Are you in the phase of your life where you're getting invited to like 10 weddings because everybody's getting married? Are you in the phase of your life where your kids are getting divided to every birthday party known to man? And so now you got birthday presents coming out. Are you getting invited to the phase of your life where all these are graduation ceremonies? Do you have a 16-year-old son? Great. He's probably going to total a car. Let's plan for that, right? Like we're going to just think about broadly and so on the personal side, there's 4 big ones, right? Auto maintenance, home maintenance, medical stuff,
Right.
and then job loss or income loss. There's other ones like gifts and some of that stuff I alluded to, but the vast majority of stuff can be at least mitigated if we think about what are the things in our life that typically can go wrong and happen. And so it's like me. This just happened to me and Hannah. My wife fell and broke her arm in October. And we have a high deductible insurance plan because we're young, healthy, and we like never have issues. And so that means that all of a sudden we have $10,000 out of pocket that we have to pay before our insurance kicks in for her surgery. Now, I changed our medical plan 3 years ago to a high deductible plan because I knew that we're young, healthy. This rarely happens. I wanted to get our monthly premium down really, really low. But I knew that I was taking a risk of something catastrophic happening because I like to snowboard, I like to work out, whatever, stuff can happen. And so while I wasn't really worried about little bitty stuff, I knew that if something happens, it's going to be 10 grand. And it was. And so luckily we planned for that and budget for it and we have it as part of the plan. But I made that medical change knowing that could happen. And unfortunately it did.
Mhm.
And so the point I'm trying to make with this is, yeah, for sure. Sometimes things can happen, but, oh, your RV needs a new transmission. How old's the RV? Right? probably going to need a new, right? We can plan for these things. We just have to admit it. And
Yeah.
that's the key.
The other thing I would add to that is like, let's just say it does happen, and let's just say that you do have to do the thing none of us want to do is like, I'm gonna have to put all that on a credit card, and that is
Mhm.
cash that I do not have in hand.
Yep.
What this allows you to do is map out the most efficient, fastest way of rectifying that problem, which is like,
Totally.
oh, yes, that wasn't there, and that is a huge chunk of change. Oh, however, I can fix that in 90 days by using this. And I'm like, everything additional gets allocated over there because I don't want that debt. I don't want to pay in that 14% or whatever it's going to be. And I don't want this to be compounding forever. So
Yeah.
how do I fix this really, really fast? So to answer your question, Trish, I would argue that is inevitable. Like that
100%.
will happen, particularly if you're just starting this journey. You're like, I'm going to get my finances together. I'm like, just bank on some wacky shit happening.
Yes.
Like for the universe to try to convince you otherwise that you should budget, like it will allow you to fix the problem faster by having a budget and allocating that money appropriately.
And that's like, thanks for saying that, right? Because I want to encourage people and know, like, that's why we say track first, right? And don't beat yourself up because this takes time. And so the sooner you get started, the more data you'll have, the better you'll be able to plan, and it will absolutely get it gets better over time, right? And so yeah, like pregnant at 67, that's totally unexpected, right? Who would have thought, right? So here we are. Things happen. Like I said, I'm not going to act like it never can, but the more we start tracking, the sooner we start tracking, the better and better and better this gets over time.
Yeah, it's and to your point here, Trish, you said we had an emergency fund for it. Still hard not to freak out, but the point is like it's there, and you're like, I didn't want to spend it there, but it's there. You don't want to have a compounding stressors. Like I have the stress of the catastrophe, and then if I'm not planning for it, now I have the stress of the repercussions of the catastrophe, which go into like now my personal finances and affect many other things.
Totally.
And that stress compounds just like money compounds, and people don't pay attention to that. It's just like plan for it, and that way at the end, if nothing happens for a while, then guess what? You just have a whole big chunk of money to go do whatever you want. You can go buy, I don't know, snowboards or whatever. So let's talk about order of operations here, Nick. So like in order to like set financial goals, milestones, and let's talk specifically to gym owners here.
Okay.
What is the goal? What are we trying to do? What is one of the things that YNAB will set people up for success for?
So my first goal for people, which is a little bit counterintuitive, is to try and build one full month ahead. And the reason I do this is because even if you have debt, like you've got some credit cards or you took out a line of credit to finance your equipment or whatever, what a lot of people do is they have a really good month, meaning good revenue month and not a lot of expenses. And they're like, sweet, I'm going to hammer this credit card. And so they spend all their free cash just to hammer this credit card. But then what happens? Well, then next month, inevitably, the lights break or the rower breaks or the annual insurance premium comes up, whatever. And now, crap, we didn't pull in enough money that month in terms of our revenue was not high enough to be enough for the spending that happened in that month. And so now that goes back on a credit card and you end up yo-yoing, right? And so now it's just like a yo-yo diet, right? It's like, crap, now we pay down the credit card, but then something happens, it's back up. We pay down the credit card, something happens, it's back up. And mentally, it is brutal. Like it is so mentally terrible to watch that happen. And it kills your momentum. And I've just seen so many people not be able to do that, even though intuitively it seems like mathematically, if you have extra cash, you should pay down the debt. And so because of that, it's why I really hammer getting a month ahead. I define 1 month ahead as you're able to show up on the first of the month and the entire month of expenses are allocated. You could pay for every single bill and expense on the first, right? And so we'll know when you're a month ahead, when you're able to use all the revenue from this month for next month.
Right.
And YNAB has a very clear way for how we do that. So that's the first goal. The reason I push that is, like I said, the emotional weight of like, we stop this yo-yoing. And if something unexpected does happen, like Trish pointed out, then we kind of have this built-in 1 month emergency fund that we can pull from if we really need it. And so we avoid going into more debt. The second step is if you have high interest debt. So if you've got some high interest credit card debt, a higher interest line of credit, whatever, after getting a month ahead, that's when I'm going to focus on paying that down. So now if I have any extra cash, if we have a really good month, I'm going to hammer that extra, or I'm going to hammer that debt until we can get that gone. At that point, I'm now actually kind of open for the next priority, which is typically I'm either going to push to get another month ahead. So I'm going to build 2 to 3 months, or I'm going to hammer low interest debt. And it does depend a little bit on the specific gym. And so I think we had a gym earlier who was it? I think it was Bridget maybe, who said that they're very seasonal. So they make a lot of money in the summer. And I want to address this question slightly in a second, but they make a lot of money in the summer and then it tapers off in some of the other months. And so for her, I would prioritize getting 2 to 3 months ahead to building up the cash reserves so that especially during the summers, you can bank that cash. And then during the lower months, you can supplement when cash flow is lower rather than like paying down low interest debt. Whereas if you're in a market where your gym is like just steady Eddie and like super, super steady and you don't have as much turnover, then I would be comfortable paying down some of the other debt while only having 1 month in the bank before prioritizing 2 to 3 months in the bank. From there, once we get the debt gone, then I'm going to prioritize, 3 months plus. And then depending on the gym, we might go more than 3 months, or we might start taking extra owners distributions at that point, or reinvesting and growing and putting and hiring a GM or saving for a building or whatever your other goals are. That's where like getting clear on some of your bigger picture vision and long-term goals really come into play.
Well, to your point, again, all of these are based on, oh, this is working. Here's exactly what I'm spending. Here's the additional cash flow that I have. And I can make, I'm going to give myself a $1,000 pay raise and I want to try to buy the building. That means I'm going to need 20%. So it always, and that's the one thing I love about YNAB is getting like being YNAB poor, which until you do YNAB, you won't really understand it. But the goal is to have zero extra money because every dollar has a job. And this is the same thing I tell gym owners. They're like, oh, I hired somebody. I've got all this extra time. I'm like, you have zero extra time. It needs to be reallocated immediately, just like your money does in YNAB. Otherwise, you're going to lose track of it and you're going to run into a problem. And that's the beauty of it. It's just like, I'm budgeting, like personally certain months ahead and in the gym a little bit, less ahead on some of those other ones. But again, all the while, you have up months, you have down months, right? So like every gym has a couple months that are down, call it December, like July or something like that. Well, if you're exercising this strategy and using YNAB correctly, that doesn't freak you out. You're like, oh, that's already been accounted for. I'm a month ahead. I'm not going to lose a month's revenue. I'm going to lose 10%, at which point I'm not stressed about it. That's just the season. And I can move on with my day and I can have like a non-stressful Christmas.
Yes, totally. Well, and one thing I want to point out that you said, because you talked about being, a little bit ahead on the gym or a little bit ahead on the personal and kind of, it's a little different, but you got them both running. It's really, really helpful. And what supercharges this is if you understand your numbers deeply on the gym and the personal side. So if we go back to our sort of order of operations, get a month ahead, pay down high interest debt, get 2 to 3 months ahead, pay down low interest debt, somewhere in there, we should pay ourselves more money. Right. And it's like, well, cool. Like gym's doing great, but like personally, I would like more cash in my account. And the question then is, well, how do we determine when and how and what we can do there? And part of it starts with deeply understanding how much money do you need to like breathe on your personal life. Right. Not like live the way you dream and want to eventually, but like just to like feel like I'm not drowning personally. Whatever that number is, we need to try, if we can, to get the gym helping you hit that number ASAP. Because if you're drowning in your personal life, you're not going to operate from a healthy mindset on the gym side, right? And so if I'm working with somebody, I might, and they're really drowning on the personal side, I might prioritize paying them a little bit more if it means they can now breathe a little bit on the personal side rather than paying down high interest debt on the gym side. because I really want to make sure they're operating from that healthy place. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing we try to tell gym owners. Just you have to take care of yourself first.
Yes. Yes.
If you are drowning, the gym is drowning. It's just the
Yes.
way that it works. So you have to make sure that you take care of that. And I talked about it at a recent summit, in like Glen Burnie. It was the kind of Northeast summit. And, gym owners are typically like they're martyrs. They're like, oh, I'll take care of everybody else. And I'm like, wrong. Like you have to take care of yourself. And if you understand, I've never known a CrossFit affiliate owner to become successful and then turn into an asshole. They become more giving. They become more benevolent. They become more generous with their time, money, and resources. And it's just like, okay, well, what if you just had more time, money, and resources to then disperse however you want? And part of that is like running a solid business. Like you want to give to those charities, maybe don't run the fundraiser. Maybe just cut a $10,000 check to that charity. And that feels really good.
Yep.
So I think that's the part that can't be overlooked, which is kind of what Mike, very much what Michael McCallum is talking about with Profit First, which is like prioritize yourself first before expenses. And now you can really make the machine go fast.
Yeah. Yep. So that clarity on both sides help you do that, right? It helps you see what you can do and what you can't. And like I said, if we're playing it out on the YNAB side for the gym, and you're like, okay, cool, I'd like to pay myself an extra $1,000 a month. Like, can we afford that? Well, if you know your numbers and you know what you're doing and we can bump that category up, absolutely.
Well, the other thing this will help, just like if you're a gym owner who's thinking about making the leap from your full-time job to the gym, this is probably the clearest way to, or the most efficient way to get a clear picture of what that would look like. Okay, I have this much. I'm budgeting my life here. This is what the gym can afford. You blend those two together. Because I've done that with people. We had 2 people last month, I believe, who have been on YNAB and they're like, oh, the numbers work. And I'm like, cool, quit your job. It'll work much better once you're there full time.
Way better. Yes.
Way better.
Way better.
But that's because they had a fully functional budget in place. And they're like, the money is there. Take it. It's yours, whether you take it or not. That is your money. So take it and then get in there full time because the machine's only going to speed up.
Yes. Well, and it gives you the confidence to do that, right?
Right.
Like that's the key, because I've seen a lot of people that, they'll have, well, I mean, the gym typically does this, or we've got this much money in the bank, but I just don't know, like, can I really do it? And it's like, yeah, well, when you see the math and you see it on paper, it gives you so much more confidence. They're like, okay, yeah. Imagine if I did have all that time that I was working at my my main job, that I could just focus on growing the gym.
Right. Here's one that just really lights a fire into me, Nick. What about taking advantage of taking a loss? This is such a deep well, but I think that this goes up there with like this. It's a tax write-off statement, which just drives me up the wall.
Drives me nuts.
That is an accounting exercise, not a cash flow exercise. So the difference is, hey, I took a loss on that, which, by the way, when people who know what they're doing say that, did not actually take a loss. That we're talking about things like if you own real estate and you depreciated your asset, they're like, oh, it's depreciated by 80% or 100% for that matter.
Yeah.
To take a loss on that to reduce your taxable income. They're not saying, I just decided to light $100,000 on fire.
Yeah. Look, this is the same as like, so there's a lot of people that, especially if you are able to like work remotely or something and you make good money, they'll like consider moving for tax reasons, right? And so they're like, oh, I'm going to move to a lower tax state. Then it's like, okay, cool. But do you actually like want to live in that state?
Right.
Like, are your friends and family there, or are you letting the tax tail wag the dog? Right.
Well, right. So in this, she gives a little bit of clarification.
Okay, good.
I don't want you to feel like we're picking on you, Trish. You're still part of the whack pack. No, that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm saying consolidating your depreciations and losses to a single tax year early in the maturity of your business. But again, you're still, that's what you're talking about, Trish, is depreciating assets, not
That's very different than
very different.
losing money in your business.
We're talking about managing cash flow almost solely in this conversation, Trish. That is a great strategy. And if anybody who doesn't know how that works, you should definitely look into it, which is the whole purpose of owning real estate, quite frankly. But that's not what we're referring to, Trish. We are talking solely about managing your cash flow.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm happy to talk about that sometime, but that's not what I'm necessarily an expert in. It's also not exactly what we're talking about here. Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed, Trish. So anything else you want to cover, Nick?
I don't think so. I think maybe here's one last thing that I'll say that like is in line with what we were just talking about on the tax side. And you said this about the tax write-off. And so I'll mention it because I've mentioned this again. I've mentioned this a ton just working with box owners. It is very, very, very important, not from a tax perspective. Okay, again, I'm not an accountant. Like, not from a tax perspective, from a behavioral perspective, that you have clarity on the difference between your business and your personal life. And so while we're kind of talking about this tax thing, what I see people say all the time is like, well, I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and buy this because it's a tax write-off and like the business could use it. And so that's helpful, but whatever. And what I see over and over again is I see people justifying spending because they know they can write it off, but that it doesn't actually make the most sense in terms of the best and highest use purpose of funds in your business for growing your business. And so if you are listening to this and like some very basic steps, I would say is like, if you have not yet separated the gym from your personal life, that is like step 0. That's like the first thing you got to do is get your credit card separate, get your bank account separate. Anything that you're running for the gym should go through the gym. Anything that you're running for your personal life should go through the personal life. Accountants want you to do that for taxes. That's fine. And I agree with that. But from a business decision-making standpoint, it is so critical because it is so easy to justify spending on the business side when you are also going to personally benefit from it because it's, quote, a tax write-off. And that's one of the things that like I want to really encourage. That's maybe the last thing that I think I wanted to say.
No, we've covered a lot here. And for anybody that wants to check out YNAB, just log on to their, it's just ynab.com. And then you can, I think it's a 30-day free trial and play around with it. There are some things, and actually I'll kind of let Nick speak to this. So I'll kind of close with this part, but Nicole brought this up at one of the I think at the games last year, but this is a Simon Sinek thing. It's just like understanding money. And for whatever reason, CrossFit gym owners, like you have this collective fucked up view of money. And they're like, well, I'm not in it to make money. I'm like, yes, you are. Yes, you are. You are in this to make money. What you do with your money is up to you. Okay. But you are running a business. You are not running a 501c3. You are in it to make money because that money will help you get to where you want to go. So when we think about the theoretical hierarchy for the development of the affiliate, the peak of that is impact. If you want to have the impact that you say you want, make no mistake about it, you are going to need money. No amount of care in the world is going to allow you to touch more people inside of the ecosystem by running a good business. So you need to get this dialed in. It is the number one thing that we deal with regard to like the biggest hurdles in gym owners, psychologically, logistically, all of it. Insert whatever adjective you want. You have to do this if you're going to run a successful business. In order to have the affiliate of your dreams, you've got to get your money right. And I've been doing it for 14 years. I've never had a better picture of my finances since I started working with Nick. That's why we were like, yo, we have to do this for gym owners. It's one of the first things we have people do when they come into Affiliate U so that we can get an accurate snapshot of what's actually going on, because that helps us make all the decisions down the road. You want to move into a new space. You want to hire a GM. You want to leave your full-time job. You want to buy a fleet of Concept 2 bikes. All of that stuff, at the root of all of that stuff is money. You have to get that stuff sorted out and you have to address it. and Nick is fantastic at it, and we're like stoked to have him. And he's just been in the background, like slowly fixing people and getting them, you know, where they need to be. So for that, dude, I really appreciate what you do. It's awesome having you on the team. Yeah, but if somebody wanted to dive in on this, Nick, like what would you suggest they do with regard to YNAB specifically?
Yeah, so I I can summarize this whole process in like three quick steps, right? And so the first step is to track your money. We use a tool called YNAB. If you go to YouTube and search Nick True YNAB, you'll get a ton of videos. Most of those videos are geared towards the personal side. I do have a couple of business videos on there. They're not CrossFit gym specific. But there's some videos on there about how to apply this to your small business. Do that, and it'll walk you through it all, and start tracking. That's it. Track, right? The next step is plan, which is what you were just talking about, which is like, what do you want? And so when I say plan, I'm not even talking about planning with your money yet. I'm talking about planning with your life. Vision planning for your life, right? And so to your point, if we think about the peak, right, you said like impact, right, is the top for an affiliate owner. It's like, what is the impact that we're making? Cool. What does that mean? Like, how many people's lives do you want to impact? What does that look like? If you're impacting those lives, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? What does a typical random Tuesday look like in your perfect peak life that you're going after? And so really writing down your vision for your life, not your box yet, but your life. What do you want your family life to look like? What do you want your work life to look like? What do you want your finances to look like? Where do you want to live? What do you want to be doing? How many hours a week do you want to be working? Then figuring out what that means for your box and going like, man, in an ideal world, this is what I want my box to look like, right? And so that planning piece is life planning, life visioning. The third step then is, if you've been tracking your money and then you write up and have a little document going like, this is what I want my life to look like. Cool. Now all we got to do, the third step, is spend in a way that aligns with the plan. And so we're going to go back to YNAB and adjust your targets and your categories and go, all right, you told me that this is what's important to you. This is the kind of box you want. This is what you want to be doing. This is what you want to be having in the next couple of years. Are you spending money in a way right now that's going to help put you on track to that document? Are you putting your money where your mouth is? If not, what changes do we need to make? And that's where most people think of as budgeting, in terms of, well, I'm going to cut back here and increase there and yada, yada, yada. But those would be the next steps. Track, plan, spend. Start by tracking. Go to YouTube. Plan. Think about your vision for your life. Write that down. Spend. Start aligning those two things.
Dude, thank you. If you guys have more questions, hit us up. We can get you in contact with Nick. He does a ton of stuff outside of working with us in Affiliate U. He's worked with thousands of people at this point, I'm assuming, Nick, all over the world. Just an absolute genius at this stuff. If you guys are interested in working with us for Affiliate U, reach out to us, schedule us a call. If you want to donate more money to Cody so that he can get coffee, just drop the appreciate that, Nikki. But we hope this stuff is, yeah, Cody's happy. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, share this with any gym owners who need to hear this, and we will see you guys next time.